Yeah.
So if you are ready, we can start.
Yeah, I'm ready. I mean, I think everybody else seems to be ready. You know, if others join us later, they'll join us later. Yeah.
Yes, so I think all of us, only one person is left, so she will join us maybe in a few minutes.
So who's joined us now since then?
Commissioner is here.
Commissioner Mohammed Shafi Amir Mia, yeah?
Yes, and Barnaby from.
Okay, I see that. Okay, fine. All right.
Okay.
So, and Barnaby is here as well?
Yes, he is.
Okay, so just the one person, which is Proti Mube, is not here.
Yes,
is that correct?
Not.
Okay, you will indicate to me when that would be, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I hope you are doing well during this pandemic, which affected all of us in this way or that way. And we would like to, on behalf of Turquoise Harmony Institute, I would like to welcome all of you. Today's discussion about social cohesion in refugee hosting communities. I think that to understand the impact of displaced population on hosting communities and the vice versa is very important to create a socially cohesive communities. Many of the time focus has been usually on the economic impact of refugees and the refugee hosting communities, but the social impact often is neglected. And we would like to bring this issue to the board this evening. And we would like to discuss about what are the mutual responsibilities of host communities and the refugee communities to achieve peaceful societies. And it is great to see representatives from the government, from NGO and the refugee communities, and people who are really working directly with the refugees here. I think it will be a great opportunity to see this challenging topic holistically from the perspectives of all the participants. I hope you will enjoy the discussion. It will be a very interesting discussion, I think. And let's see what we can learn from each other and how we can practice all these things that we learn from each other. And today, I think I don't need to introduce Ashraf Garda. Everybody knows him, and he's a prominent media personality, TV and radio presenter. So he's one of the icon in nation building and social cohesion. So he initiated many movements. I think one of the latest one he's busy with Champion South Africa. Is that right, Ashraf? Did I say correctly? And we really appreciate your contribution, and your dedication to create a peaceful South African society. And it is over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, there you are. Thanks for that warm welcome, Ayhan. Yes, indeed, my name is Ashraf Garda, and just to touch on that point, because it's central to all what we speak about now, I currently I'm the co-founder of a project, a movement called Champion South Africa. Our end goal is to move South Africa from a mid-table nation to a champion nation. For that to happen, we have to tick a series of boxes, where there's issues of healthcare and education and finance, and GDP and safety, etc. But also the issue of refugees and people coming from outside the country now, resident in this country, has got to be one of those boxes that one has to tick. So, whereas I'm not directly involved in the issues of refugees, I think we have to understand, and I certainly firmly believe this, that South African is not one who needs an ID to be a South African. If you live here, whether you're there for 5 years or for 10 years, for 1 month, for me, you have a invested interest in that country for the duration of how long you live here. But of course, we're not just talking of South Africa. We're talking the African continent. We're talking the Middle East. We're talking Asia. We're talking Europe and the Americas as well. So basically, all parts of the world, right? So a great privilege for me to moderate this session. And I think without dwelling too much on this, I'll punctuate the point that 20th of June was World Refugee Day. And you wonder, it comes up, do we celebrate it? Do we commemorate it? Do we say hello? Do we say goodbye? How much of a shift in the world took place on World Refugee Day in a similar way to how much of a shift do we have when it comes to daily targets around, for example, COVID-19? So we have daily targets around that, around the world. Do we have daily targets around COVID-19, around refugees, accepting, I would think, that amongst the countries with the highest numbers of refugees hosting countries, I think possibly Turkey and maybe Jordan, but we'll debate all of that just now. So warm welcome to all of you, and certainly to the delegates who've given up your time, and to, I will call it the audience, because in this online space, in effect, you are part of a very different sort of auditorium. But the reality, the learnings, the takeouts are exactly the same as if you would be in an auditorium with hundreds of other people. So warm welcome. I'll sort of do that for you, which indicates that I like that you've committed yourself. A few things. Ehan made the point that we will take some questions via the chat room, and people are watching it live on Facebook as well as on YouTube, the Turquoise Harmony Institute channels, so you can comment there as well, and we certainly will take it up, but you can certainly also comment here. Please do so. That the social media account for the Turquoise Harmony Institute, I'll spell it out. Well, Turquoise, TURQUOISE, and then capital H, capital I. But if you find it on my timeline today, you'll certainly find them as well. Right. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We've probably got just about an hour, right? And we've got, 7, 8 delegates, which I'm already looking at the share of space, which I think is going to be quite a challenge, because I'm looking at the people, I'm looking at all of you present who committed your time. I think it's a formidable group of people, so I certainly welcome you giving up your time, and we're looking forward to what you have to say. So the plan is this, right? I'm going to introduce each one of you, and perhaps just to save time as I introduce you, I'm going to ask you to give an opening statement on this issue of social cohesion in refugee hosting settings. And it's interesting because you can break it down into social cohesion on the one hand, and then the other part, the word refugee, and the third one, hosting, as in host nations and wherever they may be. So there's a whole lot one can dissect just from that one simple title. So I'm going to ask each one of you, as I call you up, to just give us not more than a minute, please, as an opening statement on what your thoughts are on this relationship between refugees and the countries that host them, and how that connects to this all-important issue around the social cohesion. Right. So I'm going to start then first up with Sizakela Shongwe, who's the Chief Director for Social Cohesion and Nation Building at South Africa's Department of Arts and Culture. Sizakela, I appreciate your time. So that's the quick intro for you. Perhaps just go on for about a minute maximum in terms of your take on this issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shraddha, and thank you to the panelists that are joining us this evening. Yeah, I've already been introduced as the Chief Director for Social Cohesion and Nation Building within the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, and I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion. And just in a minute, as Ashraf has already given us, to say that, of course, as he's already said in the introduction, I think as we tackle this topic, we need to remember that South Africa is a receiving country, and because it is seen as an economic hub in the region, but also in Africa as a whole. So resources obviously are going to be an issue. But also to say that we need to then look at that and look at the definition of social cohesion, and without particularly going into detail about social cohesion, to say that social cohesion simply is described as the extent to which a society is integrated based on the similarities that people or the things that they identify with each other more than the things that separate them. So when we look at this issue and we're looking at social cohesion, the extent to which we are united, we are connected, we are inclusive, we look at the different ways then on how we can make sure that the migrant community and perhaps refugees specifically feel that they are included, they are connected, and they are united to all the South African programs. that's available. But there's a lot of other issues that I'd like us to talk about when we look at this issue, looking at particularly the programs that we look at as the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, but to look at the issue of best practice models as well, to say that as South Africa, which other countries can we learn from? Uganda, Swaziland, Lesotho, people that have lived within borders, and look at, I think for me, Ashraf, what has been also interesting is the animosity of refugees, to say that sometimes it's difficult to know where to find them, how to find them, and also looking at the gender perspective to say that we usually will see the man coming to forefront, but where the women and children's issues specifically are concerned, we don't particularly where that's gender perspective.
All right. Can I just pause you there, because the last we'll pick up on that, and I look forward to that. Right. I then want to introduce Commissioner Mohammed Shafi Amir Mia, who's from the South African Human Rights Commission, which I think is a very busy commission in terms of people have views and they always believe their rights are tempered. But in this context, the rights of refugees. Thank you for your time, and then you can go ahead as well. Can you hear us, Commissioner?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
I can go.
Good evening to everybody. And I think from the Human Rights Commission, yes, you're correct. We kind of manage the tensions that plays itself out between the migrant communities and the locals. But I think there's an element of within the 27 rights in the Bill of Rights, there is an element of Ubuntu and social cohesion, which basically forces us to basically live with each other and learn from each other. Now, the point I make in the South African Human Rights Commission is that anybody who lives under the South African sun basically qualifies to have their rights protected in terms of the Constitution, and it's not negotiable. And therefore, we find that we are very busy because in 2019, as we celebrated 25 years of democracy, and in 2020 we're celebrating 25 years of the Human Rights Commission, we look at these freedoms in a very, very serious light, because obviously what's happening with the world in crisis right now, you find a lot of people that are displaced and who come into new societies, and we need to embrace them as well. In the spirit of Ubuntu, in the spirit of the freedoms and the protections of the Constitution that we have in our country. And we then basically pushed ahead last year to ensure that the Cabinet approves, a major piece of legislation, the National Action Plan against, to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and which requires us as a society to collectively root out the scourge of xenophobia and its various manifestations in society. So this is where the Human Rights Commission comes in, recognizing that South Africa basically, has always opened its borders to everybody, welcomes everybody, because that's in the spirit of Ubuntu, and they can only enrich our society by the values that they bring. And I'll give you one example quickly. If you take the Turkish Harmony Institute, they've come in with the star schools here, and what they've done as a collective in their schools is they've added a very important tool to reskill our children in maths and science. As you know, Bantu education was designed to the point where Africans were not allowed to go beyond standard.
We just lost that connection. Can we come back to you, because we will certainly do that. That of course is for now we've lost the commissioner from the Human Rights Commission. Right. I want to bring in the UN High Commission for Refugees, the head office in Durban, that is Cyril Khalil. Thank you for joining us, Cyril, and perhaps Ayhan, if you can help us to bring Cyril up here, and you can give us your opening 1 minute on this issue.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. With all protocol observed, firstly, greetings to all of the panel members as well as the participants. Okay, every year we celebrate World Refugee Day, and it's a time to commemorate the struggles of refugees and celebrate the contributions of millions of refugees, and also the communities that host them. So this year, actually, we have set the World Refugee Day theme for 2020 is that everyone counts, every action counts, and everyone can make a difference. And it is the responsibility of each one of us to make sure that no one is left behind, even during this pandemic crisis. The focus is mainly to bring about changes to make the world more inclusive and also connects with social cohesion. So this year, we also want to highlight the importance of the global solidarity and the action for people, including refugees, asylum seekers, and also ordinary citizens that host communities as well. This pandemic has made a situation where this pandemic doesn't discriminate people against their race or religion, whether which nationality you belong. You are equally affected. Until the last person is cured, you're still at the threat of being infected by COVID. So let's have a humanity in front of us and try to have a cohesive life ahead. So that's what I wanted to share. Whether it's a refugee, whether you are a citizen of a certain country, we are all ultimately human beings, and humanity should thrive. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, that's a wonderful wish list. The reality is, we know the fact that we have refugees and there's so much turmoil around the world suggests that things are just not perfect at all. In fact, they're very, very far from that. Right, I want to bring in now Gilbert Kongolo, and representing the Congolese refugee community, right, under the Tabalai Grand Sai, that's an NGO operating here in this country. Gilbert, thank you for your time and your opening 1 minute of comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. The Congolese community time to express themselves, and also wishing all the Congolese community happy Independence Day, because on the 10th June 1960, Congo got his independence from Belgium. Congo has a quite big number of refugees here in South Africa, and this topic of social cohesion is something that is very, very interesting, especially for us who are community that are coming from French-speaking countries. You know, among the facts of social cohesion, there is integration. And when I'm talking about integration, I mean breaking down language barriers that are affecting us, especially French-speaking people. You know, we are coming from the countries whereby the culture and also social living is not the same. But we cannot take that as an excuse. We need to integrate the society. Refugees community need to integrate. They need to be involved in this cohesiveness. Sorry for my English, you know, I'm a French speaker. Which that this cohesiveness arises only when bonds links groups, links members of the society, which I target as we have to develop social relations, and we have also to play on the emotions. We don't want like a South African to see people coming from outside like as inventors, people who came to invent, or the community also of refugees to see South Africans as bad people that hate foreigners. So it is like something that is stick now in our minds. And I think as community leaders, we have also to work on that emotions aspect of things.
Okay, can we just pause there, because I want to pick up, you said a lot of really important issues, and I'm sure the other delegates will also want to pick up on that. So thank you for your time, Ryan. Let me get now to Yasmin Raja, the director of the Refugee Social Services Center in Durban. Yasmin, thank you for your time, and again, you've got a minute.
Hi, thank you to Turquoise Harmony for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you, Ashraf. We always hear you on the radio, so it's good to see you today. My 1 minute comment is that no refugee leaves their country because they want to. They leave because they're forced to leave. And if you look at the reasons why refugees leave, it's in my mind, it's a breakdown of social cohesion in that country. So they've been othered on the basis of their nationality, their religion, political opinion, whatever, the five causes. When you look at the definition of who is a refugee, it's somebody that has been forced to flee because of their political opinion, their religion, their race, belonging to a certain social group, or I think I've forgotten one of them. But in any event, saying that, coming into a new country, you also, if you look at South Africa, we've come through a history of racism, apartheid and stuff like that. So we're trying to build relationships amongst groups that were kept separate before, and refugees have had to leave their countries and come through and join this already complex relationship in this particular country. So for me, social cohesion requires us to keep on reminding each other of our history and all that we hold of value, that are human values. So I'll stop at that one.
Okay, and I think that's the big takeout. But do we really do that, right? We still need to cover one or two more people. In fact, Attila Dag is with me, founder of the Universal Rights Association Victoria right now. Thank you for your time once again, and you've got about a minute.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. Good evening to everybody. I will quickly try to wrap it up in 1 minute. According to UNHCR, we at least have 7.8 million people around the world who have been forcibly flee their homes. And it is the largest number in terms of today's world. And in terms of the numbers, I have the numbers that one of the speakers just mentioned. I think you, Ashraf. The Turkey is the #1 country in terms of the hosting, which is 3.7 million according to official numbers, again according to UNHCR. And Pakistan comes second as 1.4 million refugees. Uganda comes third, 1.2, and the Sudan comes fourth, 1.1, and the Germany as well. So I think that we should take a look at the social cohesion. I'm glad that a lady from Department of Arts and Culture made a definition of social cohesion. And then if we take a look at the Department of Arts and Culture's sources, we see that department recognizes nationality as one of the perception as an exclusion tool and an obstacle which needs to be removed to achieve the social cohesion. First of all, I really appreciate the department and our minister to being away, not being away from the realities and mentioning this openly and working on it to achieve the social cohesion. And lastly, if we take a look at the meaning of refugee, who is refugee? Is a person who fled his or her own country because of a fear of rather man-made or natural reasons. They arrive to a new land, to new country, to new environment, with new hopes to save themselves and their families. And refugee already starts life with big disadvantages and in an unfamiliar and unknown environment. They already are passing through a trauma and in a lot of pain, and they need support. But I will stop right here.
Okay, there we are. Thank you for that. Let me then bring in Barnaby Gangoni, the Health Project Director at the Jesuit Refugee Service. You've got a minute, and the stage is yours. Barnaby, you there? Okay, I'll tell you what, let's see if we can reconnect with Barnaby in just a moment. I do see Priti Ngube is there. So if Priti is available, we can cross to you, Director of the Action Support Group, with particular reference to peace building around and the issues around xenophobia. Priti, can I get to you first?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear. So you just to remind you, we got about a minute for an opening statement around the issues of social justice and refugees, particular reference to hosting communities.
Yes, I think I would not want to repeat what others have already, alluded to earlier, but I think I'll just share my minute by just, sharing what we as an organization do in terms of, our activities, in terms of social cohesion activities when it comes to local communities and refugees. Other colleagues have already explained the meaning of refugees and what the responsibilities are in South Africa. And I think as an organization, as we focus on how we try and educate, I think refugees in terms of the Bill of Rights, their roles and responsibilities in South Africa, and the integration part of it. When the xenophobia attacks happens in South Africa, how we can try and come up with social cohesion programs that aims at bringing people together so that they can live in a cohesive manner in South Africa. And I think also it's about us, partnering with different refugee organizations, departments, in terms of them understanding the roles of each department when needs arise. So I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much. Right now, Ayhan Chetin with us as well. I mean, he's effectively the host. I'm the moderator. He's the moderator's moderator. If there's questions that you want to put in, whether you're watching live on Facebook, on YouTube as well as on this particular chat group, feel free to connect with your questions. Ayhan will pick it up and we'll put those questions to the delegates. But I'm going to now move on to some of the more specific issues. So I'll go back to where we started with Sizakele Shongwe, the Chief Director for Social Cohesion and Nation Building at the Department of Arts and Culture. Now, I think we all, and it's been articulated already. No, in fact, before I do that, Barnaby, who we lost earlier on, Barnaby, you're there. Can I connect with you? Barnaby? Okay. I think there may just be a connection problem with Barnaby. Hopefully we will get the green light when Barnaby gets back online. So, okay, Sizakele, let's get to you then once again. Now, everybody has articulated why refugees move to other countries. A refugee is not a choice. Very much, you actually are fleeing because of a unique circumstance, right? In many ways, we are at home now. We refugees of a pandemic, so we know how it displaces people completely, right? So we know that. I think that the bigger issue in the context of this discussion today is what happens when refugees go to other countries. So perhaps your insight into South Africa, human rights, and our constitution is absolutely top class, but not a day goes by where we have a sense of refugees being an us versus them. So we know what the rights are, but what happens in practice in terms of to what degree are refugees accepted in our country?
Yes, I'll just go straight into it to say that the other thing that I should have said in my opening statement is that how we should perceive social cohesion and nation building is as a cross-cutting issue, so that it cuts into all the programs that the departments do in government, and also to understand issues that relate to refugees as cross-cutting, to the extent that when we're talking about education, we should take into consideration issues of refugees. When we talk about science and technology, we should take into consideration what the issues are for refugees there in terms of maybe technology research, implements, and so forth. When we talk about agriculture, we should also look at the issues of refugees where that is concerned. How do they participate in that? As we had said, that the issue is around inclusion. So for me, my approach is that we should be viewing this as something that is everybody else's responsibility. And of course, government is expected to take the lead there, which is why in terms of the new administration that came in 2009, we started with the outcome-based approach, where we were looking at 12 outcomes, with the first around poverty, second around education, third on safety in communities and being safe in South Africa, and 12 on civil servants, and then 14 we had social cohesion, and where we have those delivery partners that are supposed to report on the activities that government does where refugees are concerned, to the extent that when you look at the Department of Home Affairs, they should be able to report to say that what do they do in terms of training, tracing, accommodation of asylum seekers and refugees. And when you talk about the Department of Justice, as one of the speakers has already said as well, looking at the anti-hate speech bill, and to see how do we implement it and how do we make sure that refugees are accommodated. But lastly, Ashraf, for me, after talking about this cross-cutting nature of social cohesion and this cross-cutting nature of refugees and how these should complement each other, is the issue of integration. And we've already spoken about it, to say that it's very important for us to make sure that the integration is organized. And when we're talking about the integration, then we need to look at the trust issues, because for me, we can talk about integration, but if refugees don't trust communities, if communities don't trust refugees, it becomes a deadlock situation. And in fact, this is one of the issues that have come out from the community dialogues that we have had when we're trying to promote social cohesion and nation buildings. The issues around safety, the issues around language, the issues around trust, and then the others follow. So we understand that there are those challenges, but we need to work better in ensuring that the integration is more systematic, more organized, even more available in terms of information, people knowing.
I think that issue of integration is something that Gilbert Kongolo also brought up earlier. Gilbert, I'm going to jump to you on this one, Gilbert. Thanks for that for now, Sizakela. Gilbert, let's talk about this integration thing a bit more. So we know why you're here. We know why many other Congolese are here, right? But do you get a sense that you are absolutely welcome as guests of this country, or is there a tragic us versus them, and you're accommodated, sometimes tolerated, and sometimes turned away because you're an outsider? Share your experience with us.
As a community leader of some refugees that lives here in South Africa, myself, I feel welcome here, because we don't need to look at the challenges. We have to look at the solutions. When we arrive here in South Africa, as said, as coming from countries that speak another language than South Africans, I think the first element of integration is just we are struggling to break down the barrier of language. And we encourage our people to speak, because you cannot live in a cohesive life with South African if you are not speaking the same language. If you speak what they speak, then you can integrate easily. And also we empower our people not to look at South African as bad people. You know, that image, when you come here, you think like South African are bad. Then you block yourself access to this social cohesion. And our community, our South African citizens, when we ask to them, is not to see refugees as invaders. Some people that came to invade, some people that came to take. But they have to look, and the South African leaders to look at the refugees, what they can bring, what is their contributions to the economy of South Africa, and also to facilitate that. Because it's not normal to find a refugee. Someone comes here, after 10 years, he still has a paper that cannot allow him to go to university, that cannot allow him to do the small jobs. So this one also prevents us from to integrate easily in the community.
Yeah.
Then, yes.
Okay, can I just pause you there, because I want to get in the representative from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and that's Cyril Mudakalil, right? Perhaps if you can share with us what is your experience, sort of the status of refugees? Maybe in 3 or 4 countries. South Africa is one, but there are many others on the African continent, the Middle East. That means, what I'm saying is, to what degree do countries who are hosting truly host as if you would host a guest coming into your home? Or to what degree that even though the countries are doing well and right by hosting, they have not set in place building blocks that allows these refugees to feel fully welcome, and therefore integration does not happen?
Okay, first of all, I should really appreciate the South African government, which has really acceded to 1951 Convention and 1967 Protocol, which without any reservation. That's why the refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa has got the freedom of movement and the work. There is no camp-like situation. But in the other countries, I think if you look at the neighboring countries, you will find the camp situations where the situation is not ideal, though you may be provided with, but they don't have the freedom of movement. They are actually stuck in a certain boundaries. So this is certain countries. This is the situation, the camp situation, which is not ideal. But South Africa is one of the best example that we can highlight, where the refugees and asylum seekers have got the freedom of movement, just like any other South African. They are free to move around, work, study, etc. However, there are challenges. I'm not undermining that. But certain countries, like if you look at Uganda, it's a good example. They also have similar kind of welcoming attitude to refugees. A kind of they find refugees as contributors to the economy. So within African continent, you'll find both examples. There are difficult countries where you find how they manage refugees very much differently. But in the case of South Africa, comparatively far better, because the refugees are given certain the freedom just like any other citizen in the country. So I think the other issues will unfold as we continue to discuss the issues of challenges. So
freedom is one thing, and then people like Gilbert and others say, well, we don't have documents, so we can't then study at higher levels. So I understand there's freedom of movement, but you're not fully integrated into South African society. Thank you for that. We'll pick up on that in a minute. I want to bring in the representative of the Commissioner, in fact, the South African Human Rights Commission once again. That's Commissioner Mohammed Shafi Amir Mia. You've heard some of those thoughts. So to what degree, in terms of your assessment around this all-important issue of human rights, do we find that refugees are accorded human rights or denied their basic human rights when they are, and I'm reluctant to talk of South Africa, although you are from here, but maybe in 3 or 4 countries that you can identify with, and share that with us, please.
Look, I think, Ashraf, I think from the Human Rights Commission perspective, it's very clear that the roles and responsibilities of everybody, nationals and non-nationals, are defined within the parameters of the Bill of Rights, and that's non-negotiable. That is the first thing. So the second thing here is that we're talking about the equality clauses, and also in particular the issue of Section 9 of the Constitution, which talks about equality. So when it comes to equality in relation to socio-economic rights and those kind of benefits that are there in the Constitution, as Gilbert has also alluded to early on, that they have equal access to those opportunities that are there. Now, what we need to guard against is obviously the us and the them factor, and therefore we encourage in the Human Rights Commission, and we have got a dedicated commissioner in the Human Rights Commission that deals with refugee issues as well. I mean, to the point where, if you recall, during the time of the xenophobic outbreak, and then was the issue of the Landela, camp, which we basically really took the Department of Home Affairs to task on that. And I just want to basically say from our side itself, is we take rights very seriously, because we think in order to transform society, you need to secure rights and you need to restore dignity. Now, if you're a human being, anybody,
okay, but the clarity when you say
and
we take rights very seriously, is we the Human Rights Commission, or is we South Africa, or is we humanity? Which one is it?
We as South Africans take our rights very seriously. That is why we have the Constitution, and which is the supreme law of the land, and we make it very clear that nobody is above the Constitution. And in that case, everybody's rights are protected in terms of that Constitution. And therefore, you'll always find those tensions that are there, which ultimately sometimes have to go into the Constitutional Court if need be, and it goes there. I mean, now recently, we had a judgment that was given by the North Gauteng High Court, where the social grants were extended to people who were in that space, in that category as well. So in other words, leaving nobody behind, embracing everybody. Obviously, it's work in progress. You can have a law in place, but the question is, what building blocks have you created to create that cohesion that we're talking about itself? So we at the Human Rights Commission are very alive to these issues within the international framework as well. And obviously, we always say we're a learning nation, and we need to learn all the time because that is what makes us rich. I mean, if you look at the economy of South Africa, it was built on the backs of refugees, even in the apartheid days as well. And going beyond, I mean, the new wave of migration that is taking place in this country brings new talents into this country, which can only enrich the society. And I think this is what we're trying to work with, with the state.
But you're not succeeding. What I'm saying, with respect, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Human Rights Commission would, by and large, would very much establish what human rights are, then becomes the watchdog when people complain. I mean, you're not government, with respect, right?
Yes.
And what you've just established is a wonderful embracing and respect for refugees and immigrants around the country as immigrants enrich other countries around the world. But the reality is that is not the case. If you speak to people even today in our country right now, the issue of immigrants is an us versus them. And whereas in the past immigrants were mainly from Europe, today the immigrants are very much from Africa. And therefore the way South Africans perceive immigrants is out of kilter, not just with the Constitution, but certainly out of kilter with this concept of Ubuntu, which was brought up from the first minute. Do you see any shifts in that? I don't, sadly so.
Well, this is why we have to, you see, the Human Rights Commission now is established for the past 25 years. One of the things we have to do, and you're right, we're not government, we are an independent body, right? But we have a protection mandate, we have a promotion mandate, and a monitoring mandate. And therefore, the excesses of injustices that prevails in society is where the Human Rights Commission comes in very clearly to stamp it out, and work towards transformation of a society. Now, obviously, there's a medley of problems because we're looking at the socio-economic realities in this country. South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. So obviously there's a scrambling of resources itself, and that is what leads to xenophobia and all those kind of things. But therefore we are saying in order to turn that around, we need to have a strong social integration program itself. So you can have a law on the one side, but you can have monitoring of policy that can run parallel with the law to equity in society, and bring out the rich to work with the state as well as the civil society organizations and government. I think we have a wonderful. Ashraf, we're breaking, so we're breaking, and we.
All right, we are breaking. I'll come back to you in a minute. I want to just get the thoughts of Yasmin Raja on this here, and maybe we're dwelling on South Africa because most of the people are here, but it's not about South Africa. What I'm particularly interested in, Yasmin, in your experiences, are hosting countries on side when it comes to accepting refugees, or are they reluctant hosts? Or in fact, even when they are not reluctant hosts, does it become the precursor tensions between these refugee communities and the citizens of a particular country?
So my experience has been countries have accepted refugees. They've signed on to conventions. It might seem like they're not reluctant hosts, but when it comes down to implementation of the policies, certain countries accept they domesticate all of the convention. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to use layperson's terms. All the rules, they say we're going to accept you. You have freedom of in South Africa. It's freedom of movement, the right to work, and all of that. So, as South Africans, we've got a very progressive policy. We've domesticated that policy into law. And what then happens is that we find the people that have to. Not enough is done to raise the awareness of the locals of the country to understand what this means. I mean, if you look at South Africa, not enough has been done by the Department of Home Affairs to say, when we accept people into our country, we give them enabling documents. We don't do enough to say these documents, this is what the document looks like, and this is what the right that comes with this document. There's not enough given. For instance, also in South Africa, we haven't bridged the gap. When I say we, I mean, the South African government, and we haven't bridged the gap to say, if we give you this document, we give you freedom of movement, we haven't made all our other departments understand what their role is in helping this person that has come from outside to integrate into the community.
I think that's such an important point. Thanks for bringing that up, Yasmin. I want to bring in Attila Jan once again. Maybe you can answer on the back of what Yasmin said, Attila, but also as you do that, perhaps throw in this point about, where does ultimate responsibility lie? I have a sense that all around the world, when refugee communities are being, persecuted, and sometimes resident communities are being treated like they are outsiders. I think the issues of the Uyghur Muslims of China, very, very topical, and certainly what's happening in Myanmar as well. That's just two very recent ones, right? It seems like the most pressure to uphold human rights doesn't come from the government of the day. If anything, they perpetrators, but it doesn't. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't hear the UN often very hard. I'll get the UN's views in a minute. But it comes from a series of NGOs all around the world putting on pressure. Give me your thoughts on that, Attila.
Yes, thank you, Ashraf. I think that I would like to we'll try to take a look at the situation from the refugee point of view. But before I start, I would like to indicate that the key word to achieve social cohesion in refugee or migrant issue is empathy. Without empathy, we cannot achieve social cohesion, especially in refugee and host country issue. And from the host country point of view, first of all, we all agree, definitely, that the racism and discrimination are evil things. They have never brought any good to humanity at any time. Dividing people and discriminating people according to their color, their race, their gender, cultural, religious background, or other, is unacceptable. But when we take a look at the world today, it seems like it's kind of okay to discriminate people according to their citizenship, or even their national background, or even their grandfathers, where they born in, or etc. So we need to change our mindset and perception, and understand that being born in another country, or your fathers or grandfathers being born in another country, or being a refugee or asylum seeker or a migrant, doesn't make one less human than the other. We as individuals and institutions and governments first need to accept this fact and approach the topic afterwards. And only after accepting this, we can think of solution-oriented. And I've already mentioned that refugees are the people that are already passing through a trauma and they need support. The host community should welcome the refugee with care and help them to solve their problems, of course, as much as they can in their capacity. We know that our country already has its own challenges, yes, but we should do our best. And the host community should make sure that these people integrated properly into the society and the country and the system as soon as possible to avoid any exclusion.
The issue, of course, comes up with jobs, and we'll pick up on that once again in just a second. Thanks for that. Atina, I want to get the thoughts of Priti Ngube from the Action Support Group. You're the director there. You've heard some of the comments from Attila. Perhaps you want to pick up on that. To what degree is the responsibility of government, or governments of the world, need I say, to be able to educate its citizens in the same way that the citizens are educated on understanding the importance of, say, Freedom Day or Independence Day in their countries, about how it'll always be that you are going to help refugees on an ongoing basis. The refugee may change from different countries, but the principle of assisting refugees must happen and will happen. Can you give us some insights about that? I mean, the responsibility, and whether you think governments of the day do enough around that? Priti, do we have you there? We may not. Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll get to Priti just in a second.
I'm here now. I'm here.
Okay, please do, Priti. Go ahead.
I was trying these hallelujah things. Thank you. Now, I think for us, I think what is important to note is that when you look at the issue of refugees, for one, I don't believe that we should be having refugees in any country for that matter. Maybe migration, people migrating because they want to, right? So each government in it, like for example in DRC or Zimbabwe or any other country that has already maybe, where you have most of their people here in South Africa is refugees, should take a responsibility of making sure that their political and economical challenges in their own countries are sorted out. So then you don't have to have South Africa or any other country.
The reality is that they exist.
Yes,
right?
no,
Yes.
I'm just saying, yes, I understand that. You ask me if the responsibilities. I'm saying it has to start from there, because I think that's where we always miss it, where we want to deal with the outcomes and not really dealing with the root causes. Hence, we're going to have this continuing every time. But then I think to answer your question is that it's all our responsibilities. Right now, at the moment, we're having sort of like, because of COVID-19 activities, that initiatives, social cohesion initiatives that aims at really understanding or assisting refugees and locals in terms of those challenges and how each of us can play a part in really taking responsibilities of what's happening right now. Look at the money, for example, that one of our comrades spoke about in terms of them going to court and making sure that the court allows government to give them, refugees to assist to receive money from government. If you go back to the locals and the reasons why xenophobia starts and how the refugees and migrants in the communities, in terms of integration and how we live from the time from the inception or them coming to the country, the role of UNHCR, are they educating refugees in terms of when they're in the country, they're supposed to register their companies, those that are allowed to register company, pay taxi. When things like this happen, they are also involved and there's no confusion or conflict. At the end of the day, each and every one of us, refugees, migrants, our responsibilities when you get to a country
to understand the Bill of Rights, the culture of that particular community, of that particular country. It's the responsibility of UNHCR, as much as they say that the country of origin must, the country that is receiving refugees must do 1, 2, 3, but also they have a role that they have to play. Hence, you see refugees going to camp and outside UNHCR and those conflicts that we see. It's the responsibility of South African government also to play its own part. So at the end of the day, all of us, NGOs, civil societies, refugees, migrants, it's our responsibility to take a step and learn about that particular country, the rights and the limitations, and integration part of it. All of us, we have to play a role to say, if I'm if I come to your house, for example, you have rules in your own house, right? So I have to live by your rules. Right? If I come out of that rules, obviously there will be a conflict. So I guess in short, all I'm saying is that for the social cohesion to work, for us to be integrated into communities, whether I'm a refugee or a migrant, we all have to take a step forward and learn and take a responsibility of.
And a short answer to this one, by and large, both in South Africa, in other countries on the African continent and around the world, and based upon your knowledge, do you have a sense that refugees make the effort to understand the rules of the game?
Not, to be honest, no. I guess not that because they don't want to, but because one, there are no systems in place when people come into the country, like in the border, just everyone, there's no sort of a reception from the border side when people are coming in. Maybe if we had that would assist. But also, when you look at what's happening in other countries, it's different from what South Africa, because people are free to be in the democracy. There is no camps and stuff like that. So it differs with the country to country.
Thank you for that. Let me bring in the UN, United Nations High Commission for Refugees representative, that's Cyril Dakalil once again. You've heard lots of things that are being said here. Perhaps, firstly, if you can just answer this, what is the role of the United Nations and what is the role of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in terms of understanding, implementing, setting out programs so all countries of the world understand how to deal with refugees when, God forbid, the need for refugees migrating to a certain country arises?
Okay, first of all, I have to make it very clear that UNHCR work with the governments, and protecting refugees is main responsibility lies with the states. So the need, as Yasmin cited, nobody becomes a refugee because they want to be. The situation actually forces them to move. So let's imagine the situation. We are comfortable. We have the safety, law and order, everything in place. Let's take the example of South Africa or South African who has been given the luxury of the SAPS, who is there for resolving all their legal problems. The courts are in place. Everything is there. But this is not the ideal situation in all the countries. Let's take the example of Syria. Let's take the example of a Democratic Republic of Congo. Things are quite difficult. People have no other choice, but they have to flee for their life. So this is not.
Can I ask you this just for clarity then? When a situation arises when people have to migrate to other countries fleeing for their lives, and there are sadly many examples. So you mentioned the Syria example and what's happened in the last few years, which is quite horrific. What is the convention coming from the UN or the UNHCR with governments? Is the convention to accept them because you choose to accept them, or you can reject, right? And then if you accept, is the convention accept and allow them to integrate fully, or accept but give them a space to live under a tent, as is clearly the case in many parts of the world? So they're there, but they're not integrated. They're on the outside of a house, in effect, right? And then is the convention that at some stage they must be then fully integrated? Because they're there for a long while. I look at the position of the Sahrawi people who are now, many of them resident in Algeria. Is the convention then that they're going to be learning and living and getting married there? It could take years and years. What is the convention around all these issues?
Just for the clarity, are you referring to the convention, the refugee convention? Are you referring to?
Well, I mean, it's certainly, it may not be specifically titled the Refugee Convention, but just in terms of the rules of engagement, I mean, what is prescribed to every country who may be signatories to the members of the United Nations and therefore signatory to all these conventions? What are they being asked to do in a four-liner that they know they have to do? Or is it voluntary?
Yeah, most of the countries, those who have ratified the 1951 convention, they have certain systems in place to determine who is actually a refugee or who is not a refugee. Depending on the 1951 convention, the refugee definition itself gives the criteria to assess who is really a refugee or not. So based on, as Yasmin said, a person who is fleeing the persecution because of his fear of persecution because of his religion, nationalities, membership of social group, and political opinion. So these are the 5 reasons which mainly we actually focus on to decide whether this person falls into this group. So those countries, those who have acceded to 1951 convention and 1967 protocol without any reservation. When I say without reservations, South Africa is one of the examples. Certain countries have made choice to have some reservation because they have agreed, they have set apart certain things, they will do certain things they may not do. For example, certain countries, they have encampment policy, but they really accept refugees and convention, but they limit a bit of freedom of movement. So in that case, that's how the countries also accede to this convention, without or with reservations. So certain countries have the refugee status determination set up by the government itself. In countries where they don't have the setup for refugee status determination by the government, the UNHCR itself takes on the responsibility of determining who is really a refugee or asylum seeker or a migrant, whatever. So when I say that who is a refugee, it's also very important to make a clear distinction between refugees, asylum seekers, migrants. So the main problem for maybe in the South African country and for the local person or a common man to understand the difference between the migrants and refugees. So, migrants, they are actually moving on to different countries because they want to have a kind of economic opportunity to make their life better because there is no other reason they would like to move. Whereas a refugee who actually all of a sudden is forced to move not because of his choice, but because of the convention, the fear of persecution or whatever the problems they are facing in their country of origin. So let's say migrant, this is the actual distinction that we need to make. So if we are able to educate our fellow brother in South African communities, I'm quite sure they will really accept the refugees and asylum seekers into their communities.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, this is the main thing that I have felt many times. And also, I don't see South Africans are such people because they really hate migrants. Even migrants, I don't think they hate. Because I've been working at the border, the town called Musina, where you will find so many migrants in and out every day. And it actually enriches the economy of that municipality. It's purely dependent on the economic migrants or the refugees who are living in that area who actually really contribute to the economy of that municipality. And I have seen not even one Protestant migrants or foreigners at that border site. That's a way of they have a kind of good understanding. And as Attila mentioned, the empathy is always there to reach out or to help without looking at the color or the nationality of the people. So there are many aspects of social cohesion that we need to look at. The inclusiveness, everything, or the participation in their community, whatever. These things are the main, the knowledge of the local communities, who migrants are, who refugees are, and what are the problems of refugees. I think they will really will be able to coexist in a more cohesive way. Thanks.
Okay. Hans sort of indicated to me that in fact we can go up to 8 o'clock, so we've still got about another 20 minutes to go, right? So I'm just going to stay with you from the UN HCR point of view, just for the moment, in case I slip up and we don't run out of time for just now, right? So to what degree can the United Nations and the UN, and then through the UNHCR and the governments, can they prescribe to governments as to what to do, particularly when governments fall foul of what has been agreed on before?
Is it to me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the more, I would say the inclusion is the key. As much as you can include refugees and asylum seekers into the community programs, the social policies and the law and everything, that inclusion naturally bring about the social cohesion. That's one of the things. And also, we should have more community development programs that will induce more interaction between the local and the refugee communities. Mostly, when we have the community development programs, we see maybe only a few locals are involved. That's also a particular section of community. If the government is able to look at a kind of inclusiveness in the programs, in the policies, that would naturally bring about social cohesion. For example, if you want to build a road, if you want to build a hospital, there's a kind of community development program which can include refugees and with an equal participation of refugees and as well as the local population. That will really educate about each other, their culture, their customs, and everything. They will share their customs, they will talk to each other, and also it becomes a way for them to learn their customs and culture each other. I think that's one of my recommendations that I would like to make.
Thank you for that. I'll bring in once again Sizakele Shongwe, the Chief Director for Social Cohesion and Nation Building at the Department of Arts and Culture. Now, your title is so critically important. Got social cohesion and nation building in one sentence, and it's something that I, certainly from the movement that I'm involved in, Champion South Africa, completely resonate with, right? But share with us your experience in terms of in South Africa, but then maybe you can draw on others if you know, what's worked with regard to social cohesion in South Africa with you as the host nation, and what's not worked?
I think I'll just go back to the issue that we keep talking about on integration. And I see Cyril has spoken about how refugees need to be consulted and so forth if you're building a hospital, a clinic, a road, and so forth. And I understand that. But I think, Ashraf, to a large extent, we haven't quite engaged with the issue of trust, because no matter what you'd like, maybe in terms of access to services and so forth, if there isn't this trust between the two parties, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Like, I'll just give an example as well of the programs that we do, because you will understand that. I think you mentioned that as well. We promote social coordination building through reporting on the outcome 14, but also through our national days, also through the social cohesion advocates program, which is what we're actually doing today. This is the platform that has been promoted by one of our social cohesion advocates through a social compact, whether it's with civil society, with the private sector, with religious leaders, with traditional leaders, traditional healers. But if the relationships are not good between the parties, if there isn't this trust, then I think it makes the inclusion that much difficult. And I want to speak, perhaps not even rightfully so, on behalf of refugees as well. But I will understand that refugees are not going to want to come to Human Rights Day in Sharpeville, and perhaps Freedom Day, wherever we're going to have it, and Youth Month. I mean, maybe we don't even know where to find the youth for Youth Month, for Women's Day, because maybe they don't feel safe in coming. But those are the things that we need to try and understand and unravel if we really want to go to that comfortable place to say that why is it that they fear or they don't feel safe or they don't trust to come? And why are maybe South Africans not trusting of refugees? So for me, until we get to those uncomfortable places and discussions, perhaps we might not quite be as successful in pushing the button. And I think a lot of institutions have already that we've worked with, collaborated with, have already done studies that, again, have shown that trust is a real issue, and even among South Africans before we even go to the refugee situation. So I think we need to work more on that, because these are human relations that we're talking about. Whether we're talking about promoting unity, we're promoting equality, we're promoting inclusion, then I think we need to really be genuine when we're dealing with these human relations.
No, it's interesting. I mean, you're part of a department, so you're effectively an extension of government, right? Which is slightly different to what I would want to push here. I'm suggesting that both from the ruling party and its various departments and your key department, and then all the other political parties, of course the ANC, we know, then the EFF and the DA, and I can run through now, loosely called South Africa First, and what that means. Each party leader has their own views about what they want to push, right? And I'm going to suggest that clearly it's not working, because if it was working in the last 20, 30 years of democracy, we wouldn't be having this friction. So when we talk about the trust, and I think your point is critical, that the trust must be that people need to know why are these foreigners in this country in the first place? Do we actually really know? Do we make the effort? Do we make the time to find out why is this person from Botswana or Zimbabwe? Maybe Botswana is not a good example. Zimbabwe a better one, or from Somalia or from Syria. Why are they in this country? Do we make that effort? And then B, are we leaving it to politicians who, I'm going to say sadly, the narrative is still very much trying to put a degree of one-upmanship amongst each other, or is the responsibility community leaders who are apolitical, and they need to come to the fore big time in the same way as been displayed through the COVID-19 pandemic. Suddenly then NGOs and NPOs are able to break down barriers that even government can't do it, and that is so admirable. So your thoughts between government, political parties, and then the broader society, call it NGOs, community leaders, who should be directly charged with breaking down the barriers that will create this all-important trust of why is he or she here, how do we look after them for the duration of their visit to this country, or if they choose to stay.
Yeah, Ashraf, you read my mind, because that's exactly the example that I wanted to give on COVID-19, to say at least we were able to see the president demonstrating some kind of effort towards unity, where you had all the political parties, or almost all of them, speaking in one voice. And again, that's I think one of the first things that I said in my opening remarks, to say that when you look at the issue of social cohesion as a cross-cutting kind of like people understanding what is it that brings them together more than the things that they separate them, then I think that's when you're able to come to put aside all your differences and be able to focus on the one part. So I think, having said that, then for refugees, it shouldn't be difficult as well, because we know what brings us apart, perhaps where the refugees are concerned. I think it's just an issue of strengthening those collaborations and partnerships. And I think one of the weaknesses we have from both civil society and government is that we fail to sustain those partnerships and collaborations. It's a start and go, a kind of like situation. Pretty can talk about it. 1 minute we're funding the activities, the minute we're not. For the African Diaspora Forum, 1 minute Africa Month, we are sponsoring them. The next minute, no, maybe our government priorities have shifted. So the issue of sustainability as well in the efforts that we try to implement to ensure that we really foster genuine social cohesion and nation building. And so I'll just bring it back to what Priti has said as well, to say that it is therefore the responsibility of everybody to do that, which is why the social compact that we had at the beginning of the year in February was very important, to say that if we're saying that we're having a compact between business or the media or women to say that what are they prepared to do to contribute towards social cohesion and nation building, perhaps there should have been an effort to say what are refugees prepared to do to ensure that we promote social cohesion and nation building. And I remember that when we were working with MISTRA, that Institute for Strategic Reflection, that's one of the consultation groups that I had pointed them to say that we actually have a global compact, I think, on refugees and so forth, the 4 pillars and so forth. So perhaps we need to bring them in and see how we discuss that. So basically it's everybody's responsibilities.
Okay.
The potential is great. We can pick up on that. Yeah.
All right, there's a couple of questions. So we've got about 10 minutes to go thereabouts. So we're going to wrap up very shortly. Some questions, perhaps they've been answered already to a degree, but I just want to raise them anyway. Do the panelists think there is a need, and this is from the audience, okay? Do the panelists think there is a need for a narrative change with regards to establishing social cohesion between refugees and South Africans, where both parties acknowledge their responsibilities, pledges towards each other more vocally? Maybe, I mean, the quick answer would be like a refugee charter. Perhaps one of you can respond to that. For whom does the greatest responsibility lie regarding integration of refugees? Can the NGOs tackle the problem alone? I think it's to agree something we've charged. Who'd like to answer that? If you do, just raise your hands and we can go to you. Anybody wants to answer it? Attila, maybe I see you shifting around, or maybe from the Human Rights Commission, the representative there. No.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the problem is much more deeper than that, and it's beyond the chicken and the egg story. Let me say to you what we as the Human Rights Commission in our investigations have found around these kind of tensions. We found, as Sakili was saying, that we're grappling with the problem because and the paradigm shifts that happen all the time. What we as the Human Rights Commission have done, together with civil society as well as with the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Justice, we created a platform where we embedded a Bill of Rights education in the life orientation program of all schools that are going to be rolled out next year from 2021, from grade 4 to grade 12. One of the things we're going to teach those children that are going to come out from that platform is basically to have a fundamental appreciation of the Bill of Rights, whether it's civil and political rights or socio-economic rights. And obviously, it's going to be then cascaded into how this thing is going to be rolled out into communities through the education department. So what we're basically doing is we're going to then create what we call the National Moot Court Competition, which is one of the things that the Human Rights Commission does, where we take children from all 9 provinces at grade 10 and 11, and we bring them to the Constitutional Court, and we ask them constitutional questions around these very same issues that we're discussing now, And the idea is to basically instill in our memories that it's all about human dignity. It doesn't matter whether you're a refugee or you're a South African citizen, and we think that gap in the 25 years that hasn't happened in this country. So we work very closely, and to our surprise, what had happened was we found that this was endorsed by the Human Rights Council as well as the #1 document in the world. That's kind wonderful. Of a comprehensive education program. That
is there. I mean, I think that's fantastic. But perhaps, the follow-up to that would be getting these young children from school, these students, to come and attend. But the follow-up to that would be to come with their parents, because isn't that the issue? And I see your line is scrambled, and hopefully we'll get you back and to get your thoughts on that, Mohammed Shafia, Mia. That for many people, the issue of refugees and antagonism, as opposed to the empathy for refugees, is directly related to the issues of that person, the South African, in this case, their economic status. When people are wealthy and they're comfortable, then they're quite okay to tolerate refugees, even if they don't like them, they're fine with it. But when they themselves bear the brunt of economic discomfort and poverty, they do see every extra person as a threat to their very own livelihood. So in that case, I'm just suggesting perhaps the call would be for their parents to attend these camps if indeed they would sign up. I just want to check if the representative from the Human Rights Commission is still with us. I know we lost him on a bad line just for a moment, but if not, Gilbert, if I can bring you in on that, I mean, do you want to respond to that? It should be directed to the Human Rights Commission, I know, but just your thoughts around that. You said you were very happy, but we often hear this, that people who are anti-refugee are either anti-refugee or others are saying, no, they're not. They're anti my job being taken. What is your experience and how do we work around that for a lasting solution?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garda. On the issue here is about lack of communication and the lack of understanding. South African citizens need to know, and we need someone to speak to them, because sometimes what they think about refugees is not the reality on the ground. Refugees are contributing also to the economy of this country. They are working, they are paying taxes, all of us, we are paying, and those taxes are helping to develop also the economy of South Africa. Every time when the refugees are seen as people that are coming here to take, that is not a good mindset. We have refugees that are nurses, we have refugees that are doctors, we have refugees that are teachers, and ordinary citizens, they don't understand that. As leaders, community leaders, need some time to be also educated in that issue, so that they can pass the message to build those bridges that are not existing between refugees and local communities. Every time you find there is a misunderstanding, misinterpretation, refugees, they see South African as bad people, and the South African are seeing refugees as bad people, which is not good. We need also the human rights and all those organizations that are working on social cohesion to help to multiply meetings and conferences with community leaders, so that the message, we get the message from them and we pass to our communities. Sometimes we lack even information as community leaders to speak to our people. Like in Tabalai now, what we do is to empower our people, to empower them morally, to empower their moral, to prepare themselves how to integrate here and how to go back home, because we cannot be a refugee forever. We cannot be a refugee.
Well, you see, you just hit on the nub of the story here. I see. Okay, let me just pause there because we're going to wrap up very shortly. Atila's raising his hand. Before I do that, Yasmin wants to say something. So Yasmin, Atila after that, and then we're going to have a final word for each of the panelists. So Yasmin, go ahead first.
My comment, Ashraf, is we mustn't forget the power of the vote. Refugees don't have the vote in the country, and oftentimes the fact that they don't have the vote, our political leaders leverage that to sometimes bring about the disunity and use the immigrant or the refugee issue to gain power for their political party. So I think for the first time in the last elections, we saw the immigration issue coming in. And I think it's important to bring that into the discussion, because this actually works against social cohesion.
Okay.
That's my comment.
Quick question. Should refugees be allowed to vote? That means there's a difference between a refugee and citizen, right? Should they be allowed to vote if they're not citizens of the country?
I haven't got a firm opinion on it, but I do think that some of the things that have happened in South Africa, we have refugees here for a long time. It takes a very long time for them to become citizens. So maybe we need to look at our policy and how long it's taking for people to... When you talk integration, true integration requires for the country to actually say that within a certain period of time, somebody can attain citizenship. If you look at the process in South Africa, it takes way too long. I mean, just getting from asylum seeker to refugee status is taking too long. So there's something fundamentally wrong in the way we are implementing our very progressive policy. And if you look at the amendments to the Refugee Act and stuff, there's been some pushback to all of the progressive, it's sort of taking back, trying to take away rights that had been put into place. So we as a country, we no longer seem to want a progressive refugee regime. We're moving to a more conservative, right-wing sort of process. So that's for me.
Like Donald Trump, but let's leave it at that. Thank you for your time. Yes, Attila, you've got. Just give us a minute on this, then we're going to wrap up with the others.
1 minute, Ashraf. We also, as an organization, we thought that we need a little bit of education in terms of the contribution of the refugees and the migrants to the South Africa, and we had a program held on the 20th of June. On the World Refugee Day. And then there we shared two reports, and I would like to quickly, in less than 1 minute, according to OECD Development Center and the International Labour Court, ILO, a labor organization, and the European Commission, they prepared a report in 2018. And according to this report, I'm quoting from the report, it says the migrants also have a positive net impact on the government's, they refer to the South African government, fiscal balance. This is due to the fact that they tend to pay more in taxes, especially in income and value-added taxes. And according to in 2011, they pay the migrants and the refugees between 17% under the average cost scenario. They pay 27% under the marginal cost scenario, while the native bonds are contributed to the balance a minus 8%. And also, migrants and the refugees are contributing 9.1% of South African GDP. And also, according to just one sentence, another report prepared by the World Bank report, and it says that it seems like one immigrant is creating 2 jobs for South African national citizens.
Wow.
These are the reports.
Well, there you are. Fascinating indeed. Okay, we could talk for another hour. I think there's so much, and I'd love to maybe get at another stage different representatives on this particular issue. But wrap up we need to do, but not before I'm going to do a whip around with all the different panelists here, starting with the from South African Human Rights Commissioner Mohammed Shafi Amir Mia. So just in 1 minute, maybe all of you can answer this one here. What's the one thing that you want to happen now? So we know what we've spoken about. We can't get into that at the moment. What's the one thing you want to happen now around the issue of refugees in South Africa, in Africa, and all around the world? So go ahead first, Commissioner Amir Mia.
In 1 minute, I would like to say that we need to respect and embrace each other. And I think, and close the trust deficit, as Sakile was saying. If we get that right, and then we can build on those principles towards creating a better, inclusive society. Thank you.
Okay, there you are. If 30 seconds works, you don't need a minute. The point is very, very poignant, and it's noted indeed. Thank you for that. Sizakele Shongwe, the Chief Director for Social Cohesion and Nation Building at the Department of Arts and Culture. Your final 1 minute about what needs to happen next starts now.
All right. For me, again, it would be the meaningful and genuine participation in government programs and other programs. Also, in terms of making sure that we dispel the issues around mistrust and fear so that we can have that meaningful participation. We also should make sure that we benchmark against those models that were spoken about in the region globally as well. And the role of the AU still remains important for me in terms of what Kriti had spoken about. But again, I think going back to the basics of human rights and observing, promoting, and preserving everybody's human rights, and also promoting our well-sung Ubuntu principle.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Sizakele Shongwe. Priti Ngule, your 1 minute.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, go ahead, your 1 minute.
Alele. Yes, I think for me, I would like to see a more shift, all of us shifting to a different angle where we have a bottom-up approach. There's so much amazing work that is being done by migrants on refugees on the ground. We're in Richards Bay recently, and they're doing amazing work during even COVID-19 with locals, taking initiatives themselves to integrate into the communities, looking after go-go's. And I think, for me, I think this is where it should start, where we're working with people on the ground, refugees on the ground that are doing amazing work. What is it that we can learn from them? What are lessons that we can take and share with UN and the bodies in the government departments? And what kind of social cohesion that will really speak to what a lame person understands on the ground? I think if we can strengthen that and continue with our social cohesion work and integration, and I think we'll get somewhere.
Thank you. There you go. Get somewhere. Sounds very cool and cute, and let's hope that's going to be the case, right? Yasmin Raja from the Refugee Social Services in Durban. 1 minute.
I'd like to see for South Africa that our Home Affairs departments jacks up and gives people their documents on time, takes away all the obstacles, because your document and how you recognize in a country is the basis from which you attain your rights. So for refugees in South Africa, I would like to see them get their documentation. Number one, first thing that can happen, and you know, those obstacles are taken away. The second thing is, I think for the rest, the utopian dream is that there's no more conflict in the continent or in the world, and that we start to recognize that we all belong on this one planet, we're all human beings, and that we all need to respect and treat each other with dignity. That's it for me.
Thank you very much with that, Yasmin Raja. Attila Dag, your 1 minute, final closing remarks.
Here we are. Yes, what I would like to say globally and regionally, that we need to have our empathy for the others and try to have dialogue and try to understand each other. It's obvious that South Africa has its own problems, but refugees they also have their own problems as well. So we should try to understand each other, have dialogue to each other, and we should try to seek for an opportunities to heal each other's problems and contribute to each other's lives positively.
Thank you for that. Right, Gilbert Kongola from the Congolese refugee community. Gilbert?
Okay, in 1 minute, what I would like to say and what I would like to see is that social cohesion to become a reality, and community leaders, South African or refugee, they have to communicate. We need a proper communications. We don't need to see South African as people that hate foreigners, and also South African don't need to see foreigners as people that come to take from South Africa. They have to see what refugees also brings in this country as a contribution. And asking also to refugees that you cannot be a refugee forever, you and your kids and your grandchildren. So we have to be prepared mentally, how also, or we integrate or we prepare how to go back home and build also our economy.
Thank you for that. And just talking about the Congolese, there's a message from Isaiah Mombido from the Congolese Civil Society of South Africa. He believes that if we can start exchanging our histories, knowledge between African nations, we will have a no forcing social cohesion with a natural bond. Well, I speak your language. I completely agree with you. Right, let's get then to Cyril Mulakalil, who from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Your closing remarks, Cyril.
Yeah, just more on building trust. I think we would really focus more of social protection, social participation and inclusiveness, which would would create mutual trust among people, which would form the basis for shared responsibilities towards the community and society. And given the current situation as we face this global pandemic that affects everyone, everywhere, as I mentioned in the beginning, this should enlighten our hearts and our world, a world where the value of each and every one of us has never been clearer. So I think this is the right opportunity for us to change our hearts, to have a more empathy, that the same message that I have made in the beginning, that the humanity should thrive and should understand the value of human beings, each other. It's not our color or the nationality that should be the foremost. Thanks.
Thank you for that. In fact, now Barnaby Kangoni, who should have joined us earlier, had some network problems, but he's with us. Barnaby, we say hello and goodbye very much at the end. I'm going to allow you just maybe 2 minutes or so to give your thoughts. Barnaby, Health Project Director at the Jesuit Refugee Service. You've heard lots of things, but unfortunately we can't continue, but you certainly can allow you maybe another minute more than others just to state your position where we should go forward.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me now.
Very clearly, in fact, yeah.
Oh, okay. So quickly, I just wanted to say that for us to have a realization of this social cohesion, I think in as much as South Africa has got the most beautiful constitution on the land, government really needs to do a lot. They need to be committed to this issue of social cohesion, because if they don't do that, we are not going to see anything that is going to be fruitful. Like one of our fellow panelists, she talked about the issue of documentation and how refugees and asylum seekers are treated in different departments. If government does not step in and see whether these processes are done in the correct way, as what the Constitution says, then we won't have a very good social cohesion. For example, one thing that actually touches my heart is with the portfolio that I'm holding at Jesuit Refugee Service of looking after the sick people, terminal and chronically ill patients. You actually see that asylum seekers, those who are coming in here without anything else, they are no longer accessing free medical assistance from our public hospitals, and because they are asylum seekers, they are now being treated like private patients, which is something that is not so right when it comes to humanitarian grounds. Now, these people are coming in here to seek for a service, but then the government keeps on hardening the service, the instructions to these departments, and it becomes a fueling factor that social cohesion will never ever be realized if we don't look back and see at some of these processes that needs to be taken into consideration by the government. So basically for me, it starts up there from the government, so that if it is fixed from there, then it can cascade to other departments. That's all I have to say.
That's where we're going to leave it. So first of all, a big thank you to the organizers, the Turquoise Harmony Institute. That's point one. Thank you to the panelists, all of you. I'll give you a thumbs up. It's been truly enlightening listening to the words that you've expressed, but also what comes from beyond the words is the soul. About you're at the forefront of some of the huge problems around refugees. So thank you to you, to the audience, and the audience is in different places. People connected via Zoom. Thank you to you. Then others on Facebook and others on YouTube as well. And maybe other social media platforms as well. A big thank you to you. I think there's a couple of takeouts, and I remember in the early days of COVID-19, when they still called the coronavirus in China, somebody, I saw it on Facebook or something, to say, well, you know what, it's good what's happening to these Chinese, because look how they are persecuting the Uyghur Muslims, so they're getting what they deserve, okay? And it is interesting, even when I saw that, and notwithstanding the problem of the Uyghur Muslims, I immediately realized already that if what they're saying that this is contagious, hey, there are no boundaries. So your gloating about the Chinese problem was not going to be a Chinese problem. And as we have seen, it's a problem that has affected every community in the world, every country in the world. It has no boundaries. Definitely you can withhold for a while, but it has no real boundaries. And therefore, I think by and large, the vulnerability of humanity is one. No matter where we are talking today, from be it India or Mexico, the USA or Angola, Afghanistan, the threat of COVID-19 whatever language you speak, you know what that threat is. Now, in the same way, the threat of humanity against the issues of persecution, the threats of the incredible divides between rich and poor, and out and out discrimination of peoples all around the world is bigger virus. It's a virus that has been ongoing for generations and generations. And if there's nothing else we can take out of this to say, what can we learn from COVID-19 and how we've handled that and how we felt vulnerable against the threat of COVID-19, and understand that we are also vulnerable as human beings outside of COVID-19 when we are discriminated against and persecuted only because we look different to somebody else. That point that was brought up from Sizakela earlier on about Ubuntu, it is so critically important, and therefore I sort of put my hands together symbolically to say, come on, to the world, there's something we have to do. We cannot live in generations and bear witness to multitudes of persecution of people. Now, talking about Ubuntu, the chairperson of LinkedIn, he stepped down recently to take up a new executive position there. And when they asked him about in his letter, in fact, to his staff, he said one of the great joys that he experienced at LinkedIn, and I have to use the words deliberately so, LinkedIn, was him being inspired by a concept of being together that he has stayed with, emulated, adopted, copied and pasted to his company, and it has worked wonderfully well for LinkedIn. And he said that concept is an African concept. It's called Ubuntu. It's about time we truly popularize Ubuntu so that we don't just talk about it as Africans, so that when people say pizza, we understand it comes from Italy. Why is it that Ubuntu cannot be a universal language that everybody understands? I am because you are, or perhaps I am because we are. On that note, I thank you very much for your time. Most appreciated. Very enlightening, very thought-provoking, and we'll probably all go to bed questioning just where we are in our relationship with regard to refugees all around the world. The bottom line to that, we do hope, as has been said before, there will be a day when there are no refugees any longer. Good night and good evening.